for disaster risk reduction, and I am delighted to be moderating today's session. Today's webinar will allow us to further build on the momentum that has been generated in the 3 previous learning events, which have been delivered over the course of this year. This has included sessions on the basics of disaster risk financing, preparedness instruments, and risk retention. In today's 4th event, we are going to be delving into the wonderful world of yet another disaster risk financing instrument, one which helps to transfer the costs of disasters through risk transfer. So today we'll be looking at some of the regional, national, and institutional disaster risk insurance options and some of the good practices and learnings from the Pacific. So in keeping with past events, we are delighted to have a team of regional and global experts to hold our hands and walk us through the good, the bad, the ugly on this particular risk financing instrument. Today, you'll be hearing from Mr. Carlos Lemaresi, who is the Resilient Development Finance Advisor from the Pacific Island Forum. He's going to refresh our memories on the past virtual learning events and highlight how these relate to risk transfer instruments in the Pacific. We're then going to move into our next session, where we're going to look at how we can shift the responsibility of risk and the role that insurance plays in the disaster risk financing space. During this session, we're going to be hearing from Mr. John Plevin, who is a finance sector specialist working with the Crisis and Disaster Risk Financing Global Team at the World Bank. We'll also be hearing from Mr. Lotu Palu, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Catastrophic Risk Insurance Company, or PCRIC. We'll also hear from Ms. Akata Taito, the Inclusive Insurance Hub Coordinator for the Pacific Insurance Climate Adaptation Program, PCAP, which is a joint program by the UN, led by the United Nations Capital Development Fund, UNCDF. And last, but certainly not least, Ms. Alexandra Galperin, who is the Senior Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the Pacific Department of the Asian Development Bank. We're then going to be opening the floor to all of you online to ask all of those burning questions that you have as well. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to hand over the floor to Lee Moresi, who's going to provide us a recap from our previous learning events and also discuss the linkages with the finance instrument under discussion today. So over to you, Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe, for that introduction, and also welcome colleagues online. I think we've had a few of this series, so it's important to recap and just to make sure that there's continuity and linkages between all the different learning series. So the first question is really, why have a disaster risk financing learning series? And just mentioned by Gabby, the different experts, the different types of instruments available. It is important to be able to demystify what the different disaster risk financing instruments and modalities entail, and also in terms of understanding the appropriateness for the Pacific national context, and also in terms of they actually together in combination with other disaster risk financing modalities, including efforts by national governments, how these all link into regional efforts. So in that regard, next. There has been a renewed regional effort to support Pacific Island countries with strengthening financial protection. And this has really been organized and coordinated through the Disaster Risk Financing Technical Working Group, set up under the PRP governance mechanism, which is part of the implementing a modality for the FRDP. Against that, the DRF Technical Working Group has established a working group with a work plan and a strategic framework. Work plan is based and operates under the 4 pillars of regional coordination of DRF, knowledge brokering, private sector engagement, and enabling environment for DRF at the national level. Against that backdrop, there was a need for a stronger multi-stakeholder approach at national and regional levels. So we can't bring upon changes at the national level unless we also better coordinated at the regional level. Next, please. So against the backdrop, the core principles of DRF, most of us already know this, but it's important to remind ourselves that any DRF instrument should have these four core principles at its core. Timeliness of funding, speed matters, but not all resources are needed at once. Different instruments and products are needed for different layers of risk. And there also to be some elements of contextualization, tailor-made for the local context, ensuring that the resources and the assistance reaches those most in need in the most efficient and most effective way possible. And to be able to do all that, we also need to be backed up by the necessary information in terms of data, in terms of financial and other data available, and also in terms of cost-benefit analysis of potential options. Next. As mentioned by Gabby in her introduction, there are different types of instruments, and it's important that we demystify and have a better understanding of what each entails. So the Virtual Learning Series 1, we spoke about the specialized instruments to support preparedness and really around forecast-based and anticipatory finance. There's risk retention, which I believe was the focus of the previous virtual learning episode. And today, I understand we'll be talking about risk transfers. Keep going. So this is a very common and often used graphics just to illustrate the needs and the points made around the need to risk layer or to layer the financial instruments according to the risk levels. Next. As mentioned before, the virtual learning series focus on overall DRF landscape in the Pacific, talking about the basics of DRF, and that was preempted by a virtual episode for the media. It's important that we get the right information out through the right channels, and that we have a better awareness and understanding of the DRF landscape in the Pacific. Now, VLE2, as mentioned, anticipated action and forecast-based financing. VLE3 on risk retention, especially around the national contingency funds and national budgetary measures. In today's episode, we'll be talking about risk transfer. And mainly, when we talk about risk transfer in the Pacific, we're talking about insurance. But within the insurance space, there are a lot of different layers within that as well. And I won't talk too much about that. I'll let the experts on today's panel talk more about that. Just in closing, the point really I want to make around the DRF instruments, that each instrument have their own appropriate situational applications, and they need to be aligned with the national financial capacities and development resilience planning of the national governments, including their financial resilience. With that said, I'd like to hand over to the moderator. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lee. And so now that we've had all our memories refreshed on the past learning series, as well as their interlinkages and importance for today's discussion, we're now going to move on and take a deep dive into the issue at hand today around risk transfer. So as I outlined earlier, we're going to be hearing from a series of both global and regional experts in this area. And we're really going to be putting some of these experts on the spot with some very specific questions for them. So I'm just going to check before we do this, whether we have our colleague from the World Bank, Mr. John Plevin, whether he is already online. If John could make it known to us if he's here already. So maybe not yet. So while we're still waiting for John to join us, I'm going to move straight on to our good friend at Akasha over at UNCDF. So Akasha, we know that it would be really interesting to hear from you on the work of UNCDF and PCAP, which focuses on meso and micro level risk transfer products. It would be great if you would be able to share with us a few examples from your work in the Pacific and to really explain to the different stakeholders on the call today about this work and its impact and what opportunities you see for covering the needs of rural and remote island communities across this region. So over to you, Akata.
Hi, thank you, Gabby. Just to confirm, can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So before I deep dive into responding to the specific question to new members joining this learning series, or if you're not familiar with our program, the Pacific Insurance and Climate Adaptation Program, or PCAP, we are a market-based program aimed to work with the private sector in developing appropriate climate and disaster risk financing and insurance. And I emphasize that we do not directly offer insurance. We provide technical and funding support to insurance companies and other key players in the market to offer the product. We are currently heavy on the insurance component, but we are slowly moving into the financing aspect of climate and disaster risk financing and insurance. And we acknowledge our funders, the Government of Australia and New Zealand, UN-India Partnership Fund, and the Government of Luxembourg. With reference to your question and the topic for this learning series, I will talk on this perhaps from a strategic partnership approach and how we have engaged different players in the market to offer parametric insurance. And before I go on into this, I would like to also probably highlight that when we started working parametric insurance, we started with a baseline of 0, meaning that there were no such climate and disaster risk products or insurance at the micro and meso level. And so our efforts really started by establishing a proof of concept that the market ecosystem can be developed and made to deliver sustainable solutions. And in establishing this concept, we followed a holistic approach in our overall implementation plan. And this is made possible through the strategic partnership or the model that we have. It was important for us to understand the local context. So for instance, in the Pacific region, there are some countries that do not have any regulations around insurance. We know that insurance services are under the regulatory ambit of the respective central banks. And while some countries do not have any insurance regulations like Tonga, there around the Pacific, there is no country that have specific micro insurance regulations, let alone parametric insurance. And so for market conduct and consumer protection purposes, we worked with global experts to develop best practices guidelines for regulators and practitioners in this space. And we also engage various players in the region so that we are able to capture their feedback, understanding that they are better placed to provide country context. And through this market-based approach, we provided support as well to the private sector on the other end, where this is through performance-based grants and technical support, but also through the aggregator models such as cooperatives, farmer associations, to ensure that when a solution is developed around climate and disaster risk insurance, these solutions are reaching vulnerable groups such as farmers, women, and MSMEs. We also have advocacy agency partners providing awareness around financial literacy, insurance literacy, knowing that the insurance uptake in the region is very low, and digital literacy as well, so that the end users are also provided with the necessary tools to make sound financial decisions. Now, specific to the climate and disaster risk insurance products, the design is based on demand studies, where we go out into local communities and we try to understand what are the key climate risks that our vulnerable groups are faced with, the impacts at the household level, community level, and their willingness to pay, understanding that once these solutions are issued into the market, we would like to see this purely market-driven, meaning that they are able to afford and pay for the insurance product. So based on the feedback that we received, we designed 2 key products where initially it was covering cyclonic events. And so in 2021, we launched our first parametric insurance product in Fiji, where we covered 1,388 households and with covers of around 1,000 and 2,000. During the pilot phase, we were closely monitoring the impacts of these products. We were talking with end users, those that have taken up the product. We also engaged independent assessors to go out into the field and talk to our farmer associations, the cooperatives, as well as members in the community. And based on the feedback that we received, we made enhancements, knowing that rainfall is also a key peril in Fiji. And so enhancements were made where rainfall was added as a new peril into the new list of products. And with the support that we have provided to the private sector, within 2 years, we now have 3 players in the market, namely Fiji Care, Sun Insurance, and Tower. And perhaps this is an indication that the private sector see business opportunities in this space, and so they're coming in to provide similar products and letting the market run competitively. Also, probably first in the world is where we have linked climate risk insurance and social protection, where during the launch phase, we approached the Department of Social Welfare to add a climate risk insurance cover to their social protection work. And at the time when we approached the department, we were aware that government was only just coming out of COVID-19, but we also through our various partnership and discussions with other players or other UN agencies, we were aware that World Food Programme also have a mandate in terms of social protection and food security. And so this parametric insurance work ties in well with that mandate. And so we had discussions with them where they had, during the pilot phase, come in to provide subsidy support to 274 welfare beneficiaries, which were identified by the Department of Social Welfare during the pilot phase. The structure of the social protection product was kept simple, and this was based on experiences of past climate events, like Cyclone Winston, which was an extreme event where government, following the impacts of Cyclone Winston, paid on average around $100 Fijian a month to social welfare beneficiaries. And so based on this same model, we structured the concept around or the product around that. And so the risks or the total cover for the social protection is capped at around $400, say on an average of 4 months recovery, and with a lower premium of 8%. Now, what this basically means as a risk transfer mechanism is that government comes in to say, pay insurance cover for 274, the 274 was covered by World Food Programme. Now this year, government saw opportunities and they have come on board to support 2,000 social welfare recipients. The numbers now have increased, and they're looking at staggering the supports so that ultimately within the next 3 years or so, more recipients are brought into the system. And this risk transfer mechanism means that government, through the premium support, pays around 64,000 Fijian dollars. In the event of an extreme climate disaster, the insurance companies will pay a total of 800,000 to 2,000 social welfare recipients. From the recipients' end, they are able to receive much needed funds more quickly. The same concept can be applied to the market-driven product, where an individual or a farmer can sacrifice, say, $100 a year, which is around equivalent of less than $2 a week, to pay for premium and say for a cover of $1,000. And again, in an event of extreme natural disaster, or say Category 5 cyclone, if the farmer is located within 25 kilometers from the eye of the cyclone, the insurance company then pays the farmer $1,000 within 2 weeks. These funds provide farmers or vulnerable communities with quick access to cash, and therefore enhancing their resilience and accelerating their recovery. The integration that has been done on the digital side through the mobile network operators means that the premiums, payments through the distribution of payouts can be done directly through the mobile wallet. The traction that we have seen through the mobile platform in Fiji have been used steadily and has increased over the recent years with digital ecosystems being developed and is working well. And so this ensures that the funds reach households quickly and safely following a disaster. Now, based on what I had just mentioned and earlier indicating the baseline of 0, over a period of 2 years, we have now successfully moved the market significantly, covering around 1,388 households in 2021 to now we expect to cover more than 4,000 households before the start of the next cyclone season. And work is already underway so that we ensure that technical capacities within the insurance companies build so that over the next years or next 5 years, we are able to successfully exit the market and let them operate in a sustainable manner. So I'll stop here for now and happy to take questions after.
Thanks so much, Akata. It's really, really great to hear this really innovative and cutting-edge work that you're doing here in the region to reach some of these more remote and vulnerable communities as well. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions for you in the breakout session as well. So now I'm just going to be going back a little bit and now just inviting our colleague from World Bank who's been able to join us, Mr. John Plevin. And really just to get your thoughts, John, in really simple terms, if you can just explain to us what risk transfer is. And it would be really interesting to hear from the World Bank about your future direction on the development of such instruments. Over to you, John.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I hope this doesn't seem a little bit upside down, but yeah, I can take a quick step through what is insurance is, what risk transfer is. And so for the sake of this session, I'll focus on catastrophe risk transfer because there's a lot of different ways that risk transfer can come, and obviously this is the most relevant for the group of you today. So maybe first we can just start with what's the issue that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve the issue that not only do we have a long-term cost of disasters on average, i.e. they happen frequently and cause a lot of trouble, but when we have a severe disaster, all of the cost comes in a very short period of time, and most organizations or individuals don't have the capacity to pay for that. So either you sell assets or you have to divert resources away from other places that need them, or maybe you fail to respond, which can be very, very costly. So in order to solve that, we do, and maybe I can use the phrase risk sharing rather than risk transfer. And I think it's fundamentally the same concept. We share risk among us. So in a really simple example, maybe we group together as a group of people and we all put in some money every single year. And if one of us has an accident, has a disaster, then the money that everyone else puts in can be used to support that person. That's effectively how an insurance arrangement works. So this is an example would be from mutual insurance, which is a very basic type of insurance where there's kind of a solidarity principle and everyone pays in, and whoever needs the money whenever they need it, they get hold of that. Now, all we're doing with insurance and an international risk transfer is applying this principle to a larger group of people so that it's more likely that we have enough money to pay for the disaster when it happens. But of course, that comes with some costs in terms of the cost of understanding the risk and paying for the modeling and paying for the payout. So on the plus side, we have a sharing of risk. On the negative side, we have a cost that's associated with that to run the scheme. But what are the benefits then? There are different benefits for different buyers of insurance. So for micro insurance, so this is individual households or small and medium enterprises. This can support incomes and assets, or food security, or livelihoods after disasters. If you're insured, it means you're more likely to be able to access borrowing. You're more likely to be able to invest in projects and increase your wealth. For meso insurance, so this is insuring groups of people, organizations, lenders, banks. This allows lenders to lend more because they know that after a disaster, they'll still have the money in place to be able to service their loans. It can also allow value chains to continue to function after disasters. And then at a sovereign, a government level, it protects budgets, and reduced budget volatility can have a real benefit in terms of GDP growth. There have been a number of studies that show that a stable, predictable budget is a big facilitator of growth. It can help governments to respond to the most vulnerable and keep the economy running by recovering key services and assets straight after disasters. And you asked, what are some of the areas that the World Bank are looking into here? I think one thing that we've been particularly interested in is this area of risk pools that the World Bank have collaborated with in a number of regions around the world in the past 10 years or so. And I think Lotte is going to talk a lot more about this in the coming minutes. But I think what we're keen to do is to make sure that this insurance, sovereign insurance from these risk pools is placed alongside other investments in other financial instruments that can be used, for instance, to pay for more frequent losses, where insurance is for these big losses where you can't cope on your own. To link it to micro and meso insurance, such as the products that our colleague in UNDP was just talking about, and of course in investments in physical resilience. So this is very much the thinking of the World Bank in terms of what the priorities are for the region and in fact globally at the moment. Perhaps I can stop because I know that we're a little bit tight for time. Happy to elaborate or answer any questions.
Great, thanks, John. I'm sure there's also going to be heaps of questions for you too, but we're going to be turning into one of those different mechanisms that you talked about now in terms of regional approaches. And now I'm going to be asking our colleague Lotte from the PICRIC, or the Pacific Catastrophic Risk Insurance Company, who have historically been involved in the region's risk insurance pool. It would be really interesting for our audience to hear from you what lessons have been derived from PICRIC's work in this area and what opportunities you see developing in this space as well. Over to you, Lotte.
Thank you, Gabby. Are you guys listening to me? Can you hear me? Okay, excellent. Let me begin by giving some sort of a historical background of the company, and then I'm probably going to share some talking points, related to climate change, to what we are providing in the market right now. But just for the benefit of those who are not fully aware of the company, PICRIC was established in 2016 as a captive insurance company domiciled in the Cook Islands, and this is the only provider of sovereign risk insurance in the Pacific, and among the whole world, there's only 4 companies that are providing sovereign insurance product to their own governments, which is PICRIC in the Pacific, Caribbean they have a CRIF, and then we have African facility and also the Southeast Asia facility. So there are only 4 companies in the whole world, and PICRIC is the one for the Pacific region. So, but we have to also understand that the company policies that we are currently designed to offer or currently offer the market is not designed to cover all the losses faced by the government follow a disaster. But basically it's aimed to at least to provide a quick injections of cash to the countries follow a major natural disaster like cyclone, earthquake. But those are the 2 products that we are currently offering out to the market. It's only cyclone and earthquake. So it's also at the same time, more like act or act as a direct budget support to the government to finance any immediate relief needs. So we have to understand that any immediate relief needs post-disaster. So the company is not really giving resources in terms of recovery and reconstructions. We are just providing resources directly to the relief dimensions or relief phases of the disaster-free phases. So we are just concentrating on that entry point. But I also wanted to share some talking points in terms of providing some context quickly before I dive into the questions being provided. We have to also understand that climate change comes to stay with us. And then we have to be ready. Climate change has a lasting consequence on our livelihoods, on our economics, and also on our fiscal balances for the governments, and also including individual households and businesses. And then we also have to understand that the Pacific Island countries are the most vulnerable and exposed region to climate change. At the same time, we have most countries, and I think including everyone, private sectors or individuals, that we have severe limited resources to prepare and to also respond at the same time to any disasters, situations that happen to the countries or anybody else. So from that talking points themselves, we also have to understand, whoever is listening, and including others from the government or the private sector, we have to understand the correlations between disasters and economics, because that will allow the policymakers and the partners to effectively plan for response to any hazard events with appropriate resources. So with that being said, I wanted to link that to the opportunity that we are currently having right now. I mean, to the current lesson learned that we have identified since we took over these positions in 2020. The first one, I think, in 2020, around November, within 3 months, we conducted some sort of consultations with more than 10 countries in the region. And what we have identified at the time, that the demand for sovereign risk pool insurance is still high. And there was a clearly indications that there is a need from the Pacific Island countries to have access to appropriate and cost-effective financial protections against disaster. So there was a demand out there when we conducted the consultations in the regions. For the fact that the most people that we talk to, the senior officers and several ministers, that they have a better understanding that the frequency and intensity of the disaster across the region is increasing every year, every month. So it's only through some sort of a pre-arranged financial protection measures that countries across the region can be able to, to withstand that demand for cash during that relief period. So immediately aftermath of the disaster, as long as the countries and the governments be able to receive some sort of good financial protection resources from the company, that they can be able to respond effectively to during that relief period. So that's one point that I wanted to also highlight. But at the same time, we have to understand that whatever resource that we are offering to the market from the company, we are not the only solution here. We are not the only solution. I have to emphasize that point. We are not the only solution that we be able to provide resources and to test all the disaster costs for a particular policyholders or government. So, but insurance from the company can offer some sort of one form of relief so that the government can be able to breathe some fresh air physically because of the resource that we offer or provided to the countries post-disaster. So it's also good for the countries also to have some sort of a comprehensive strategy or disaster risk finance strategy so that they can be able to identify all the existing instrument or existing tool within the disaster risk finance space that can be able to provide any resources post-disaster situations. So that's the first one. The second point is the affordability of the premium. When we took over, we know that, well, let me begin by saying that the current arrangement, the policy holders that we are offering, we have been holding a policy with us, has been subsidized through either allocation except Cook Islands, that they are paying from their own resources, including Tonga also and Samoa, they have their own share, risk sharing in terms of providing some domestic revenue to us in terms of paying from their own budgets. But at the same time, a majority, I can say 80%, more than 80% of the premium has been subsidized through a allocation for a particular project for Tonga. enterprise project. So affordability was something that we took in seriously based on the consultation that we undertaken in 2020. It was came loudly from the countries that they need resources because of COVID has affected significantly of their fiscal space. So they don't have much fiscal space to spare for their premium. And but that's one lesson learned that we identified right there, that we need to secure additional resources for the countries to support them with their premium subsidization. At the same time, try to build the ownership of the country, and also from our situations to provide further guidance to the country on how to build or to strengthen that partnership in terms of building ownership on the ground. The one point that I also wanted to add, the importance of diversifying the current product that we have. As I said right at the beginning, we only have two products off the market, which is cyclone and earthquake. So that's pretty much more relevant to the south. While the North Pacific, they are not prone to cyclone and earthquake like Marshall Island, like Nauru, Kiribati. So these countries, they are awaiting for us to come back, whether we are going to have a new products online, which I will talk about it later. But it's important to diversify the product that we're having now so that we can be able to cover the whole Pacific. As of now, we are just concentrating on the South. It's also important to diversify the financial sources for the countries, not just to concentrate in one. So the last point that I wanted to add also here is the technical assistance. One of the key points came out from the consultations, the lack of technical assistance from all the countries. So it's really important for the company and to work also with the partners, regional organizations to offer technical assistance, capacity building to the countries so they can better understand the model and also the product that we offer and what are the available instruments within the disaster risk finance so that the country can tap into. I'll stop there. That's the lesson learned, unless if you want me to tap into the opportunity side. But the opportunity side, one thing I wanted to add, we have two new products coming to the market next year. One is excess rainfall and the other one is drought. So we are expecting to roll out that to the market around early next year. So that's what I wanted to share with you, Tepi, right now. Thank you.
Unmute me, yeah. Great, thank you so much. Laju, obviously an area that you've thought deeply about because you've also shared with us lots of really tangible recommendations on the way forward. So thank you so much for that. And now before we go to the questions, we have got one last speaker to hear from, and that's Alexandra from ADB. And my question for you, Alexandra, is that the ADB features really prominently in risk transfer throughout the disaster resilience programming in the Pacific. It would be good to hear how ADB is both helping countries to strengthen financial protection to disasters and how countries can also better engage with ADB in this space as well. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I'll talk about following up on Lotu's statement on the PICRIC, that's one of the solutions, and the Pacific Disaster Risk Resilience Program is another solution that ADB is offering. So ADB has a range of instruments to address post-emergency needs and provide emergency assistance through grants and loans and technical assistance. But typically, in order to set these up, it takes some time. It may take, between 6 weeks to 2 months to put these in place. And the novelty about the Pacific Disaster Risk Resilience Program is that through contingency disaster financing, ADB has the ability to provide assistance pretty much immediately after the occurrence of a disaster in the form of general budget support. And this complements other assistance financing instruments and sources. So in order to qualify for this program, become eligible countries, complete a set of legal, institutional, or policy reforms in the area of disaster risk management. And since 2020, health emergencies are also included in this. So what the program does really, it plays a dual role. It promotes policy reforms, policy dialogue, and implementation processes. And it provides this quick financial support in disaster situations. The assistance is triggered through a soft trigger, so declaration of a state of emergency or the equivalent of a public health emergency. So the rationale is pretty much that this instrument addresses in the risk layering pyramid a medium layer of risk. So disasters that would typically occur every 3 to 10 years. Time really matters, as we know, in disaster situations. So as recovery, as response is delayed, there are accumulating indirect costs. So it's really important to have these fast dispersing funds beyond the humanitarian phase. It also kind of promotes disaster preparedness for a government to know that these funds are available. It helps with thinking through allocating funds and budgets through, for instance, contingency plans, preparedness plans, action plans, and it facilitates the rapid prioritization of needs. It is really strongly also related to disaster risk reduction because of this policy dialogue, which I will come back to, that addresses, resilience issues. And last but not least, there's a really strong demand from Pacific countries. So just to give you a little bit of a historical background, it's still quite a new instrument in the sense for ADB. It was piloted actually in the Pacific in 2016. And the first phase of the program was started in 2017 that included 3 countries and has since been growing actually quite rapidly. So in April 2020, and following on the disbursements after COVID-19, the program has grown to actually include 10 countries. And as I mentioned before, initially the program focused on natural hazards only, but now health emergencies are also included. Overall, ADB has approved 20 contingent disaster financing operations. So far, they total 170 million, and of these, 139 have been dispersed. We're currently actually working on the 4th phase of the program. So in terms of the assistance, both deepening the dialogue with countries and facilitating access to this disaster risk financing instrument, as well as looking at the policy reforms, we provide technical assistance as well under this program. And one of the elements that are actually quite important to bear in mind, and Loto was talking about this as well, is the increasing frequency and intensity of natural hazards, which change really the disaster risk features in countries. So what the technical assistance that is associated with this program does is to help countries conduct national level disaster risk assessments to better predict these trends, see how natural hazards are changing, including those associated with climate change, to understand, for instance, what will be the fiscal burden in 10 years or in 20 years. In relation to that, also what the risk assessments are doing is to get a better understanding of the assets, of the infrastructure, update in terms the information in terms of what is there and what the replacement costs are to predict future losses. What's really important also in terms of our dialogue with the countries is the regularity of having these interactions. Obviously, during COVID, this was a little bit more difficult. But there are a number of countries that actually have a joint policy reform process where these reforms are reviewed and that have allocated space to resilience. And this is really important because, as I said, this instrument is complementary to what other partners are doing to also what the governments are doing themselves in terms of financial resilience. So it's really crucial to have this dialogue on a regular basis, and that will also help us to put together, the information in order to help countries qualify for this instrument. Last but not least, I just want to say that in terms of financial resilience of countries, it's not just important, of course, that countries have access to the financial means to address disasters, but also that there's a swift process in allocation, disbursements, in terms of emergency planning and budgeting, grant making, emergency procurement, so that actually the funds reach those who are most in need. And through the TA, we also provide assistance on public financial management to improve these processes. So that's really very much an overview of what we're doing. I'm happy to take questions later on.
Great, thanks so much, Alexandra. A lot of information in there and really good to hear about that comprehensive support from the ADB. I'm now going to open up the floor to questions. I see we only have 10 minutes remaining, so we'll take some questions from the floor. I'm not sure if anyone has put any questions, your burning questions up in the chat yet, but if not, don't be shy. Feel free to put up your hand, or you can just also turn on your camera and ask your questions and make the good use of all these experts we've got on the call today. So is there anyone there with a specific burning question? We don't want you to have a sleepless night about it tonight.
Only Lee may have some firing question, not burning, but firing.
Okay, Lee's got a fiery question. Great.
Yeah, since you put me on the spot, I was going to ask you about whether we sign up for your insurance products. Now, but seriously, you mentioned one of the issues around, from your analysis around the question around premiums and also the technical support. So the technical support is okay, but in terms of cost-benefit analysis, comparing the premiums that countries pay for a certain level of protection versus the other available instruments, I'm just wondering if you guys have done some analysis around that in terms, given that the constraints with the national financial resources, if you can demonstrate, or if you've done some modeling around demonstrating the value of the cover received versus the premiums. And then you might also, if you want to cover around the premium subsidization program that you guys have with assistance from donors. Please,
okay.
Not this complicated.
Yeah, Lee, thank you. And I think that's where the World Bank is coming in terms of trying to develop disaster risk finance strategy for the countries, because that's pretty much going to help in terms of identifying all the instruments available to the countries, which basically align to the risk layering. It depends on the exposure, per country's exposure, risk exposure, and then and if the World Bank can be able to identify all the existing instruments, and they can tell you that to the risk layering approach, which the higher exposure, the middle exposure, whatever they do it from the technical side, and there is available instrument which the country can be able to tell you. We are the only sovereign insurance company offering that sovereign macro level insurance to the countries. So as I said, we are coming in on the relief phases of the whole disaster phases. So we are not providing resources to recovery or reconstructions. But of course, the resources that we give into the countries on the relief phases, it's completely up to the countries. They may use that resource available to them for, to expedite the process for the recovery or reconstruction. It's completely up to the countries. So coming back to the premium arrangement, Lee, yes, we took that the outcome of the consultation that we undertook in 2020 to our donors, and Germany responded positively with 10 million euro. So that 10 million euro is still sitting with the World Bank. We are still waiting for them. We are hopeful that by end of the year, maybe early next year, they can be able to provide the 10 million euro so that we can be able to subsidize the existing product that we are having to the countries in the region, and also to subsidize the premium for the countries for the 2 new products that will be coming to the market, roll to the market early next year. That's the excess rainfall which is related to flooding and the drought. And this week we are in Tonga right now. We are in Tonga right now with the drought team, which they are going to validate the information and have further consultation with the government ministries and relevant stakeholders in terms of trying to validate the information that they are using for development of the drought product. Thank you, Lee, and hope that answers your questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lotu. Just as a follow-up question around, we're talking about disaster preparedness is also an important part of preparedness of DRR landscape. If there has been any discussion, obviously, I think you need to discuss with other partners as well. If you can reflect a country's investment in preparedness, can be reflected in some sort of premium discounts.
Lee, I think that's a good question that you raised, but I think, currently, based on the conversation that I had with senior officials, there's a clear indications that, most countries, they still think insurance or risk pooling insurance is a cost, is vis-a-vis investment. So we have to work hard in terms of trying to change that mindset, that move away, that thinking that this risk pool offering, whether it's BCAP or PICRIC or other instruments available out there now, they are currently under development. Not to think it being, to see those products is more like a cost for the countries or the government, but see that as an investment, because that's where we have to work hard in changing the mindset. And at the same time, maybe if you look at from your experience when you were on the ground, Lee, that most of us working as an officials, we always thinking in terms of reactiveness, just wait until things happen that we provide, instead of trying to be prepared, moving from reactiveness to be more proactive. And that's also related to being prepared. Being prepared meaning you cover your premium, so that once a disaster happens, you can at least access to the resources, to available resources to give you some fresh air of money. So I know you're lovely, but that's the fact. So to pay your premium, meaning that you have to increase your adaptation, capacity in adapting to or adjusting to any change of climate change. Yeah. Any impact of climate change.
Hi, Lodu. You hear me? This is Kepo here from Tonga.
Go ahead, Kepo.
Go for it, Kepo.
Okay, just based on what has been asked with regards to premium, and I've heard with the discussion by Lotu regarding the new products, which is trout coming to Tonga. As I previously mentioned to you guys that we're rather on a volcanic eruption than this trout thing, because that is actually what really hits us. And also on premium, there was the question on every year there is a rise of 10 grand with the Tonga premium payments to PICRIC, if there is no extra benefits to the policy. Can you please elaborate more on that? What is the logic behind it on your premium calculation? That we have to increase by $10,000 every year and the policy stays the same? And there is no extra benefits that Tonga will receive. And also, when are you guys going to do the volcanic eruption thing so that it's going to be a worthwhile investment to Tonga, not as being rejected on the recent disasters? Because we believe that the policy should be geared to the country, the disaster events, rather than applying at on the other islands to us, but it's not really geared directly to what we have experienced so far up to recent, this year. Thank you.
Kepo, if I respond to you on your first issue and second on the premium, I'm glad that John Berwin from the World Bank is also attending the meeting. He can also explain it to you from the technical side in terms of the Tonga Hawaii volcano eruptions. As I understood, as of now, Kepo, there is no product available in the whole world to respond or to provide any support towards any volcano eruptions. So I think maybe that's everyone in the whole world, we are put into shock
And I'm just going to have to interrupt you on this one and ask maybe if you could continue that discussion together offline, because we've got a number of questions also for some of the other panelists. And in the interest of time, we just might move on. So we've actually got one question that's come in from Vanuatu, who's really interested to find out how they can procure some of this technical assistance that some of the other agencies have spoken on. So I might put that question both to UNCDF, to World Bank and to ADB. And this is from Jeff from the Australian High Commission in Vanuatu about how does a country go about requesting technical assistance. So if I could ask you all of to answer that, and also maybe in the interest of time, noting that we've only got 2 more minutes left of our webinar, if you could also just summarise with a key takeaway that, you know, you want everyone on this webinar to be left with in terms of like a really salient point around the risk transfer, risk sharing mechanism that we've spoken to about today. So, John, I'll direct that question to you first.
Thanks. So yeah, to the colleague from Vanuatu, yeah, so the World Bank has been providing technical assistance for a number of years in the region and continue to have resources targeted to do this. And the way that we're doing this at the moment is to focus on supporting governments in developing their disaster risk financing strategies, and then using that to shape investments and policy priorities across the whole disaster risk financing landscape. So to your simple question of how do we access that, then you contact the either contact the World Bank country liaison officer, or you drop me an email after this meeting and I put you in touch with the right people, and we follow up and see what makes sense. I just wanted to quickly just touch on the questions that were posed to Lottie, because I think it's important just to clarify these, and I'll just take 30 seconds. On the coverage point, I know this is very much PCRIC's business, but my understanding is that the insurance premium goes up by 10,000 each year under the current arrangements for Tonga, but this does come with an increase in coverage. So I think it does increase the coverage, just to clarify that point. And on the volcano products, as Lotu said, the science for volcanic eruptions is very, very complicated. And so there isn't a product around the world that offers coverage for this. What I would recommend is that you consider other financial instruments, whether it's a contingency fund, whether it's the World Bank or the ADB's contingent financing instruments. There are other ways to cover these unknown risks. And then what's my takeaway from the day, or something I'd like to leave you with? I think it's important to remember that we're together in the Pacific, between governments, between development partners. We're doing a lot on disaster risk financing now. There's a lot of momentum and there's a lot of exciting work happening. What I think we need to remember is that quality is going to be hugely important here. So making sure we get these products right, making sure they're linked to the right planning and the right investments in resilience, making sure that the technical design of the product is correct. We can't afford for this to go wrong. As we start to get a better understanding of the region and a better momentum, we can't afford for there to be a loss of confidence in the future. So let's make sure we get the quality right. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That was really clear. And Akasha, I might just pass to you. And also just for this additional question that's coming from Christine in the chat, just maybe if you could talk briefly about your thoughts on what could be done to resolve this issue that the Pacific has a very low insurance buy-in. So we'll put that one to you, and also just any key wrap-up point your side.
Hi, thanks, Gabby. So on the first question, as we are planning now for our regional expansion, we're moving from Fiji to Vanuatu, Tonga, and next year we're looking at starting demand studies in Kiribati, Solomon Islands, and Samoa. We will be putting out a request for proposal, and this is going to be an RFP, an open RFP. So local players such as cooperatives or farmer associations, the private sector, they can make their proposals, submit their proposals through these open RFPs, and we would be more than happy to look at this respective RFPs, and we can share that with regional players such as the Australian government based in Vanuatu or other players in the market. And what basically happens within these open RFQs is that through the support, technical and funding support that we provide to regional players, we expect, these institutions for sustainability to also have sort of skin in the game. So it's either 50% investment or more, so that, when we pull out, we ensure that there's plans as well at the local level or institutional level for business integration and so on. And in terms of the second question, the level of confidence within beneficiaries, yes, the uptake in insurance is relatively low in the Pacific region and particularly at the individual level. But this is something that we are well aware of. And so we're investing a lot of resources in terms of creating awareness, ensuring that the individuals understand the benefits of the solutions that we bring into the market. And, ensure that they continue to pay the premiums. Again, just echoing what Lotu had mentioned, whilst at the government level, they can see this as an investment. At the individual level, they should also see this as an investment, because if you look at it for $100 cost that you're paying every year, in the event that a cyclone hits or category 5, say, it's a $1,000 cover. And if you're putting aside $100 savings, that will take you around 10 years to get to $1,000, so to say. But if you invest that in insurance, you are more or less transferring that risk at a personal level to the insurance company, so that the insurance companies can pay you for the cost that you at $100. And again, as Lotu had mentioned, with the frequency intensity of cyclones, we know that it is going to happen. So it's always better that you prepare yourself, even at the individual level, reduce the burden on government and reliance as well on government assistance, and be self-sustainable. And just probably final comments. A key question that we ask ourselves as a catalyst in the market is, how can we ensure that insurance companies continue to see opportunities in the market? Right now, as we pilot products in the market, we like to think that this is the honeymoon period. So how can we ensure that after the honeymoon period, the insurance companies are able to sustainably roll out parametric insurance product as we prepare to exit, and let them run on their own? So again, going back to the investment from private sector, ensuring that they also have skin in the game. So their investment is right through from the start. So as we roll out these products, they are already preparing themselves, building in the internal capacity, supporting them through transfer of knowledge. As we bring in global players in the market, we ensure that that knowledge is transferred to local players, so that they are able to continue being innovative and agile in the space of climate and disaster risk financing and insurance.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Akasha, for those takeaways and thoughts. I'm just going to ask our audience if they can indulge us for another 4 minutes, just so we can wrap this all up properly and just hear from our other two experts as well. So, Alexandra, I pass the floor over to you just for some final key takeaway points from your side, please.
Okay, just to answer the question that was asked in terms of accessing technical assistance. So there's really two ways. I mean, it's a two-way dialogue that we're having with the governments. So we are in touch with some of the key offices and representatives that work on disaster risk management and disaster risk financing. So we're hearing from them, but it's also, there's a possibility to contact our country offices directly if there's specific ideas, and there's technical assistance in this field, not only through the Pacific Disaster Resilience Program, but we have a range of other climate change oriented programs where assistance could also be provided. So as I said, just be in touch with ADB through country offices. You can also drop me a mail after this event, and we can see how this fits into plans. In terms of a takeaway, I think this is another event that has shown that this is a very complementary effort underway in disaster risk financing, and that really underlines the need for collaboration to improve on the existing products. And I think both Lotu and John have emphasized this. I would like to come back to the question on the information that is underlying all of these products and the risk layering. So the disaster risk information, I think we need to continue improving the information that is there at the regional level, but also at the national level. So ADB is very supportive of this type of collaboration. We've been working with Pekrafi, for instance, providing building data sets from Tonga, from a major disaster risk assessment that we conducted there. And we'll continue doing that as we expand these efforts into Vanuatu and the Cook Islands. So thank you.
Kepi, can I just add quickly one thing?
Lotu, yes, that's you. We're just going to get to you now. Definitely, you can add something.
I quickly, Kepi, on that, because I just wanted to add that this is the beauty of having this technical working group that established by the FAM, that we are part of it. You know, so that the countries can be able to indicate to us their technical capacity building needs, and then we can formalize it from the regional architects arrangement so that we can help the countries. So, or perhaps under, you know, the ban of Lee's responsibility in terms of identifying all the needs from the countries, and then us in the technical working group can look into that and see how best are we going to provide that support to the countries, like through a peer-to-peer learning or whatever platform is available to provide that needed technical capacity to the countries. I wanted to also conclude by saying that, you know, if eventually the World Bank agrees to divert the funds to us, there is a potential $2 million US for technical capacity building in the regions within the disaster risk finance space. So we are hopeful. If that gonna comes, there will go some further conversation will be undertaken within the technical group and see how best are we going to allocate the resources to the need of the countries. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lotu. And it was really great to hear from all of you about this importance of collaboration and partnership. I think this came out really strongly, and also the work that this technical working group also provides in convening and bringing us all together around these issues. So, you know, as a follow-up to this, you know, many of you would know that this is the fourth of 4 series virtual learning events, but certainly there is ambition and an appetite to keep continuing these discussions together. So after this webinar, we will be sharing with all of you a survey monkey to seek your ideas and input and feedback into also other areas that we can continue to discuss and learn more together as well. So please watch this space. We're really looking forward to your feedback on other meaty and thorny issues you would like to chew through. And then we can come back together both in a virtual world and potentially also some face-to-face meetings here in Fiji as well. So I would love to thank you so much to all our wonderful panel of experts that we've had join with us today and to discuss this really important tool around risk transfer and risk sharing in the Pacific. I think you've really clearly articulated the importance of these products, about working together, about the complementary nature that it needs, and also some challenges, but really importantly, some solutions and the way forward as well. So on behalf of the Pacific Resilience Partnership and the team here, thank you so much for joining with us today, and you'll be hearing more from us on other ideas and future events together. So Vinaka Vakalevu, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. This is the Lee.